What would you do if the only home you've ever known rejected you and the country you were born in barely remembered your name? This is not a dystopian movie plot, it's a real story. A story of deportation, uncertainty, and redemption. When dozens of young men and women were repatriated from the United States back to Burkina Faso, many expected silence, shame, rejection. What they received instead was a warm, defiant welcome from a president who refused to let his people be forgotten. Ibrahim Traoré didn't see returnees as failures, he saw them as future builders. And what happened next is something few expected, a political and social revolution rooted in dignity, driven by youth, and led by a man willing to challenge both internal corruption and global power dynamics. This video is not just about one African leader, it's about the spirit of a nation rising when many thought it would fall. It's about second chances, collective strength, and the quiet power of those society often writes off. Before we dive into this story, I want to know something. Where are you watching this from? Drop your country in the comments below. I love seeing where our global community is tuning in from. Also, tell me, have you ever had to start over? Have you ever been made to feel like you didn't belong? Let's talk in the comments. Your story matters. And if this kind of deep, real-world content speaks to you, don't forget to subscribe to the channel and turn on the notification bell so you never miss a powerful story like this one. I post every week, and we dive deep into the moments that define people, nations, and entire generations. Now, let's get into it. This is the story of Ibrahim Traoré, the repatriated youth, and the rebirth of a nation. It began with a memo. One short government document that quietly made its way across desks, from Washington, D.C. to Ouagadougou. It stated, in dry diplomatic terms, that the United States would be repatriating a group of foreign nationalsmen and women who, for various legal or bureaucratic reasons, no longer had a place in America. Among them were dozens of young people originally from Burkina Faso. For the U.S., it was a matter of policy. For Burkina Faso, it was about to become a test of leadership. President Ibrahim Traoré first heard the news during a routine morning briefing. The room was quiet, air thick with the usual reports: agriculture outputs, infrastructure status, international correspondence. But as his advisor mentioned the impending repatriation, something shifted. Ibrahim looked up. His mind, always alert to the undercurrents of politics and the soul of his people, instantly caught the gravity of what others brushed off as just another line on the agenda. He didn't speak at first, just sat back, fingers folded, eyes fixed on the ceiling, like searching for meaning in the silence. Most of his team assumed it would be dealt with through the usual channels: paperwork, protocols, maybe a press release. But Ibrahim saw something deeper. This wasn't just about immigration or foreign policy. It was about dignity, identity, and how a nation sees its own children, especially when the world doesn't. The young men and women being sent back had left Burkina Faso as children or teenagers. Many had spent years, sometimes decades, trying to make it in a country that had promised opportunity but often delivered struggle. They had tasted American hope, but also American rejection. Some had earned degrees, others had worked long hours in kitchens and warehouses. Some had families, others had only memories and scars. And now they were being placed on a plane, their lives condensed into bags, their dreams left suspended in transit. What would happen when they touched down in a country they barely remembered? A place they once called home but now felt foreign? Would they be received as failures, as burdens, as reminders of a dream denied? Ibrahim refused to let that happen. He called for a private meeting with a few of his most trusted advisors and ministers. His tone was calm but direct. "We will not greet them with silence. We will not let them return into a void. If they must come home, we will give them something real to come back to." That night, Ibrahim wrote in his journal, as he often did when moments felt historic. He scribbled down a single line: "They are not leftovers. They are our seeds." The next morning, he held a press conference unusual for a matter like this. Standing in front of the national flag, flanked by youth leaders and civil servants, he addressed the nation with clarity. To those returning, Know this: Burkina Faso has not forgotten you. You may have left in search of better days, but today we welcome you not as strangers, not as burdens, but as builders. This is your land, your future, and your home. The message went viral. Not just in Burkina Faso, but across the diaspora. Social media flooded with messages of pride, hope, and cautious optimism. People who had long felt unseen were suddenly spoken to directly, humanely. And behind the scenes, Ibrahim wasn't just talking. He was planning. He requested a full list of names, ages, skill sets, and stories. He asked local communities to prepare support centers. He instructed the Ministry of Labor to begin identifying job opportunities and internships. NGOs were mobilized. Volunteers stepped up. There were town hall meetings in Wahiguya, Bobo-Dioulasso, and smaller rural towns to explain what was coming and how the nation could help. Some advisors questioned the energy and resources being devoted to this initiative. Should we prioritize this group over our local needs? One minister asked in a closed-door meeting. Ibrahim didn't flinch. These people are our local needs. They just left earlier, and now they're back. There was hesitation among the population, too. Not everyone understood why repatriated citizens deserved such fanfare. But Ibrahim believed in the long game. He knew public perception could be changed if action matched the rhetoric. As the day of arrival approached, preparations intensified. The national airport was readied not with fanfare, but with dignity. Journalists were instructed not to sensationalize. The president himself chose to attend not as a publicity stunt, but as a statement. On the tarmac, as the first flight arrived, the mood was tense. Some of the returnees stepped off the plane with fear in their eyes. They didn't know what to expect: bureaucracy, interrogation, or worse, indifference. But what they saw instead was Ibrahim Traoré, standing in the sunlight. No podium, no security wall, just a simple, open-armed gesture of welcome. "You are not here to be judged," he said quietly to one young man as they shook hands. "You are here to help us build what others could not." One young woman, clutching a worn backpack and blinking back tears, whispered, "I thought I was being discarded." Ibrahim nodded. "We don't discard family." And just like that, Burkina Faso had begun rewriting its own narrative, own act of recognition at a time. When the planes touched down, the air was thick with emotion. Not just the heat of Ouagadougou's dry season, but the silent tension wrapped around every returning passenger's heart. Some wore blank expressions, hiding the chaos within. Others clutched small bags tightly, the only pieces of their lives they could carry. For many, this wasn't homecoming, it was exile. Their memories of Burkina Faso were faded, like half-forgotten dreams from childhood. Streets, smells, even the language felt unfamiliar. Some had left as children, others as teenagers chasing the American dream, but all had returned with uncertainty in their eyes. As they stepped off the plane, expecting long waits, maybe interrogations, they were met instead by calm order and unexpected kindness. Volunteers handed out water bottles, signs in French and English welcomed them, and a medical team quietly stood by in case anyone needed help. But most notably, at the center of it all, stood a figure few expected to see in person: President Ibrahim Traoré. No stage, no bulletproof glass, just him, plain suit, open collar, and eyes that met theirs without judgment. Some stared, disbelieving. Others looked away, not knowing how to process the moment. Ibrahim didn't say much at first. He simply greeted each person with a handshake, a nod, a short welcome. But behind those small gestures was a deeper message. You are not forgotten. In a country still wrestling with poverty, conflict, and the scars of colonization, this reception wasn't just symbolic, it was revolutionary. Never before had a head of state greeted deportees like heroes. One young man, 24-year-old Musa, who had lived in Pennsylvania since the age of 8, told a reporter, "I thought we'd be processed like cargo." I didn't expect a handshake from the president. His voice cracked as he spoke. "It's the first time in years I've felt seen." The following days were a whirlwind. The returnees were temporarily housed in government-prepared accommodations, clean, modest, and organized. Each center had counselors, career advisors, and cultural guides to help them reacclimate. Workshops were offered, from language refreshers in Moray and Dioula to sessions on local customs, job opportunities, and entrepreneurship training. For the first time in years, many of them began to believe that maybe, just maybe, they weren't unwanted after all. But the adjustment was far from easy. Reverse culture shock hit hard. Some couldn't remember the local dialects. Others found Burkina Faso's infrastructure jarring after life in American cities. A few expressed frustration, wondering if this was truly a fresh start or just a new version of displacement. The heat, the noise, the chaos, didn't know it would feel this foreign, admitted AWA, a 29-year-old nurse from Chicago. I feel like I'm in someone else's country. Ibrahim knew this would happen. In one closed-door meeting, he told his cabinet, "We cannot expect them to feel at home in one day. We sent our children abroad, and now they're strangers in their own land. It's our job to reconnect them, not force them to assimilate." He insisted on patience, resources, and most of all respect. "We are not reabsorbing them. We are welcoming them into a new Burkina Faso, one they can help shape." One of the earliest successes came from an unlikely placia, small farming cooperative outside the capital. The cooperative had been struggling with aging tools and limited technology. But among the returnees was Emmanuel, a 32-year-old with a background in agricultural engineering. Within a week, he proposed a new irrigation model using low-cost, solar-powered pumps. By the end of the month, the cooperative had nearly doubled its crop yield. "We used to farm because we had to," said the local leader. "Now we farm with pride." This small victory sparked attention nationwide. Media outlets began running stories of returnees, launching businesses, teaching tech skills, and mentoring youth. A former mechanic from Detroit opened a repair shop that trained local apprentices. A woman from Atlanta launched a digital literacy program for girls. Slowly, the narrative began to shift from pity to potential. Ibrahim, ever the strategist, saw this as proof of concept. He convened a national youth forum, bringing together locals and returnees in an open dialogue. "We are not two groups," he said. "We are one generation with two journeys. And today, those journeys converge." Not everyone applauded the effort. Detractors, including some politicians, accused the government of favoritism, claiming local youth were being neglected. Ibrahim addressed this directly. "This is not about choosing between our children, it's about uniting them. The future of Burkina Faso will be built with every hand, those who stayed and those who came back." In the weeks that followed, tensions eased as more success stories emerged. Repatriated youth began forming networks, partnering with local leaders, and investing their skills into long-term projects. From tech hubs to health clinics, they brought not just ideas, but hope. And hope, Ibrahim believed, was the most powerful currency of all. Even as Burkina Faso began its slow but powerful transformation, not everyone celebrated. Within the polished offices of the capital and in the air-conditioned boardrooms of old political networks, something darker was brewing. The returnees, the programs, the shift in national pride, while inspiring to the public, were seen by some elites as a threat to the status quo. For decades, a handful of individuals had maintained control through patronage, corruption, and dependence on foreign partners. Ibrahim Traoré was disrupting all of it. The whispers started softly. Conversations behind closed doors. Former ministers meeting accidentally with foreign diplomats. Anonymous memos circulated through bureaucratic channels questioning the legality of some of Ibrahim's reforms. But this wasn't just political discomfort, it was fear. Fear that a new generation, one not shaped by old colonial alliances or silenced by inherited debt, was gaining traction. The rise of these youth, the future builders, signaled more than innovation. It signaled independence, and that terrified the powerful. Ibrahim had long anticipated resistance. He knew that change would provoke backlash. But what he didn't expect was the depth of betrayal, especially from someone within his own inner circle. His cousin, Issouf, a man he had grown up with, shared meals with, trusted with strategic planning during the revolution, was now suspected of engaging in backdoor conversations with international agents. The intelligence reports were vague at first: an intercepted call, a meeting in Paris, coded messages exchanged over email. At first, Ibrahim didn't want to believe it. But the evidence piled up. His advisors grew increasingly concerned. Commander Diarra, his closest security aide, delivered the final report in private. "Mr. President, we believe Issouf is involved in efforts to destabilize your administration," he said, voice low but steady. "There are indications that he has been promised political backing, possibly financial incentives, to undermine key reforms." Ibrahim sat in silence for a long time. He felt as if a wall inside him had cracked. This wasn't just political maneuvering, it was personal. It was betrayal, layered over brotherhood. And it forced him to confront a painful truth: not all revolutions are won with unity. Some are broken by ambition. He called Issouf in for a meeting the next day. No cameras, no aides, just two men in a room where their shared past echoed off the walls. "Tell me the truth," Ibrahim asked. "Have you turned your back on what we built?" Issouf hesitated, then replied, "I didn't betray you. I protected us. You're moving too fast. You're provoking too many enemies. I was trying to stabilize things, in my own way." But Ibrahim's eyes had already changed. The hurt was real, but so was the clarity. "You weren't protecting us," he said quietly. "You were protecting your seat at the table." The fallout was swift. Issouf was removed from his post and placed under investigation. The government made a public statement, vague enough to avoid diplomatic scandal, but firm enough to send a message: no one is above the nation's integrity, not even family. Almost immediately, coordinated opposition began to stir. A group of former politicians, military figures, and business elites formed what they called a stability coalition. Publicly, they claimed to support national unity. Privately, they aimed to erode Ibrahim's authority. They held meetings with foreign stakeholders, leaked misinformation to international media, and funded protests in the capital disguised as grassroots discontent. But what they didn't expect was how deep Ibrahim's connection with the people had grown. The same returnees once viewed with suspicion were now defending the presidency. Neighborhood leaders who had seen firsthand the benefits of new programs began rallying their communities. Even members of the diaspora abroad started organizing support campaigns. Still, the pressure mounted. Western media began painting Ibrahim as radical and unstable, accusing him of consolidating power and intimidating critics. Economic threats were floated. Aid discussions stalled. A few embassies issued veiled warnings. Ibrahim gathered his cabinet and addressed them plainly. "If we bend now, we lose everything we've built. We were never supposed to succeed. Not because we lack the ability, but because we dared to dream without permission. That's our real crime. We believed we could stand on our own." He paused, looking each of them in the eye. "So now they will test us, and we will answer not with fear but with more building, more truth, more unity." And that's exactly what they did. Instead of retreating, the government fast-tracked several new initiatives: public housing projects in rural areas, free internet access at youth centers, and a nationwide campaign promoting civic education and anti-corruption values. Ibrahim's approval ratings surged. And with every completed bridge, every new school, the Stability Coalition lost credibility. But Ibrahim wasn't naive. He knew this was just the beginning. The enemies outside the country still saw him as a threat. And now, some enemies within had revealed themselves. He would have to fight on multiple fronts, but not alone. Because now, standing with him, were thousands of returnees who had once thought they had no home. Now they had found not only a country, but a cause. Even as Burkina Faso began its slow but powerful transformation, not everyone celebrated. Within the polished offices of the capital and in the air-conditioned boardrooms of old political networks, something darker was brewing. The returnees, the programs, the shift in national pride, while inspiring to the public, were seen by some elites as a threat to the status quo. For decades, A handful of individuals had maintained control through patronage, corruption, and dependence on foreign partners. Ibrahim Traoré was disrupting all of it. The whispers started softly. Conversations behind closed doors. Former ministers meeting accidentally with foreign diplomats. Anonymous memos circulated through bureaucratic channels questioning the legality of some of Ibrahim's reforms. But this wasn't just political discomfort, it was fear. Fear that a new generation, one not shaped by old colonial alliances or silenced by inherited debt, was gaining traction. The rise of these youth, the future builders, signaled more than innovation. It signaled independence, and that terrified the powerful. Ibrahim had long anticipated resistance. He knew that change would provoke backlash. But what he didn't expect was the depth of betrayal, especially from someone within his own inner circle. His cousin, Issouf, a man he had grown up with, shared meals with, trusted with strategic planning during the revolution, was now suspected of engaging in backdoor conversations with international agents. The intelligence reports were vague at first: an intercepted call, a meeting in Paris, coded messages exchanged over email. At first, Ibrahim didn't want to believe it. But the evidence piled up. His advisors grew increasingly concerned. Commander Diarra, his closest security aide, delivered the final report in private. "Mr. President, we believe Issouf is involved in efforts to destabilize your administration," he said, voice low but steady. "There are indications that he has been promised political backing, possibly financial incentives, to undermine key reforms." Ibrahim sat in silence for a long time. He felt as if a wall inside him had cracked. This wasn't just political maneuvering, it was personal. It was betrayal layered over brotherhood. And it forced him to confront a painful truth. Not all revolutions are won with unity. Some are broken by ambition. He called Issouf in for a meeting the next day. No cameras, no aides, just two men in a room where their shared past echoed off the walls. "Tell me the truth," Ibrahim asked. "Have you turned your back on what we built?" Issouf hesitated, then replied, "I didn't betray you. I protected us. You're moving too fast. You're provoking too many enemies. I was trying to stabilize things in my own way." But Ibrahim's eyes had already changed. The hurt was real, but so was the clarity. "You weren't protecting us," he said quietly. "You were protecting your seat at the table." The fallout was swift. Issouf was removed from his post and placed under investigation. The government made a public statement, vague enough to avoid diplomatic scandal, but firm enough to send a message. No one is above the nation's integrity, not even family. Almost immediately, coordinated opposition began to stir. A group of former politicians, military figures, and business elites formed what they called a stability coalition. Publicly, they claimed to support national unity. Privately, they aimed to erode Ibrahim's authority. They held meetings with foreign stakeholders, leaked misinformation to international media, and funded protests in the capital disguised as grassroots discontent. But what they didn't expect was how deep Ibrahim's connection with the people had grown. The same returnees once viewed with suspicion were now defending the presidency. Neighborhood leaders who had seen firsthand the benefits of new programs began rallying their communities. Even members of the diaspora abroad started organizing support campaigns. Still, the pressure mounted. Western media began painting Ibrahim as radical and unstable, accusing him of consolidating power and intimidating critics. Economic threats were floated. Aid discussions stalled. A few embassies issued veiled warnings. Ibrahim gathered his cabinet and addressed them plainly. "If we bend now, we lose everything we've built. We were never supposed to succeed. Not because we lack the ability, but because we dared to dream without permission. That's our real crime. We believed we could stand on our own." He paused, looking each of them in the eye. "So now they will test us, and we will answer not with fear but with more building, more truth, more unity." And that's exactly what they did. Instead of retreating, the government fast-tracked several new initiatives: public housing projects in rural areas, free internet access at youth centers, and a nationwide campaign promoting civic education and anti-corruption values. Ibrahim's approval ratings surged. And with every completed bridge, every new school, the Stability Coalition lost credibility. But Ibrahim wasn't naive. He knew this was just the beginning. The enemies outside the country still saw him as a threat, and now some enemies within had revealed themselves. He would have to fight on multiple fronts, but not alone. Because now, standing with him, were thousands of returnees who had once thought they had no home. Now they had found not only a country, but a cause. After weeks of mounting tension, whispers of betrayal, and veiled threats from inside and outside the country, something changed. It wasn't the kind of change that arrives with fireworks or parades. It was quieter, more grounded, but just as powerful. The people began to rise, not with weapons, not with riots, but with purpose. From small villages to crowded markets, a new kind of energy swept across Burkina Faso. It was the energy of ownership of a population deciding that their future would no longer be dictated from conference rooms or foreign capitals. Ibrahim Traoré, aware that no movement survives without grassroots momentum, did something no president had done before. He stepped down from the podium and into the crowd. Instead of just broadcasting policy from his office, he began holding citizen assemblies under trees, in classrooms, and in local marketplaces. No cameras, no media stunts, just real conversation. At one such meeting, a young mechanic named Seydou stood up and said, "Mr. President, this country used to ignore us. Now, we feel like we matter. Please don't stop." And Ibrahim answered, "I won't stop, but I can't do it alone. This country will not be saved by me. It will be saved by all of us." The message resonated. Returnees continued to pour their energy into rebuilding. Some started cooperatives, others launched small tech hubs, and many joined civil service programs aimed at infrastructure, healthcare, and education. They didn't wear uniforms or carry banners. But they moved like an army, a disciplined, determined force for renewal. But as the nation came alive, the opposition grew bolder. The Stability Coalition that had formed after Ibrahim removed his cousin Issouf was now actively lobbying foreign governments. Intelligence reports confirmed they were seeking support from former colonial powers and certain Western agencies displeased with Burkina Faso's pivot towards self-reliance. Financial deals were rumored. Sabotage was suspected. And once again, talk of a coup began to surface from outside invaders, but from within. This time, however, Ibrahim was ready. He called an emergency midnight meeting with his most trusted advisors. Commander Diarra laid out the intelligence. There were plans to stage unrest in the capital, followed by a coordinated seizure of communications and transport hubs. Some members of the military were already compromised. The goal: force Ibrahim to step down under the guise of restoring order. Ibrahim listened silently. Then he stood up and said, "They mistake our silence for weakness. They mistake our patience for fear. But they have underestimated one thing: our people are awake." He ordered immediate action, not to crush dissent, but to cut the roots of corruption. By morning, key officials linked to the plot were arrested. Sensitive documents were declassified and shared publicly. Ibrahim addressed the nation in a televised speech unlike any before. Calm, direct, and brutally honest, he laid out the reality. "There are those who say I have taken too much power. They are right because I have taken back the power they stole from you. There are those who claim I am destabilizing the region. But they were never afraid of instability. They were afraid of a new example. They are afraid of you." The speech sent shockwaves through the continent. For the first time, a leader wasn't just resisting foreign pressure, he was exposing it. And not through nationalism or aggression, but by invoking dignity and sovereignty. Across Burkina Faso, people mobilized, not in chaos but in coordination. Farmers pledged their harvests to feed soldiers and workers. Returnees formed digital teams to monitor misinformation online. Clergy from both Christian and Muslim communities preached unity from their pulpits. Even students began organizing local cleanup efforts and civic awareness campaigns. The revolution had matured from emotion to action. Meanwhile, Ibrahim kept working. He launched an emergency national task force named Shield of the People designed to reinforce vulnerable sector electric grids, water supplies, and public transport. He sent inspectors to audit foreign-owned companies. He renegotiated resource contracts to ensure profits stayed in Burkina Faso. And quietly, he opened discreet communication channels with neighboring African leaders inviting collaboration and, when needed, protection. But perhaps his most radical move was radically human. He personally visited a military unit rumored to be considering defection. No convoy, no bulletproof vehicle, just him and Commander Diarra. When he arrived, soldiers stood frozen. No one saluted. The tension was thick. Ibrahim stepped forward and said, "If any of you believe I am your enemy, I am here. Do what you must. But if you still believe this flag is yours, then stand with me. Because I will not kneel to anyone who wishes to sell our children's future." Not a single shot was fired. One by one, the soldiers put down their weapons. Some wept. Others hugged him. The unit pledged loyalty. News of this moment spread like wildfire. It wasn't just a political victory, it was symbolic. It proved that leadership by courage, not control, can still win hearts. In the weeks that followed, the coup plot collapsed. International actors who had been hedging their bets quietly pulled back. The Stability Coalition fell into silence, exposed and outmaneuvered. Burkina Faso, still poor and challenged, had survived yet another test not through military might, but through civic resilience and moral clarity. And Ibrahim? He didn't celebrate. He went back to work traveling to schools, visiting farms, sitting with nurses and truck drivers. When asked how he felt about stopping the coup, he simply said, "I didn't stop it, the people did. I just refused to get in their way." With the coup defeated and the conspirators exposed, Burkina Faso stood on the edge of a new era. But victory was never the end. It was merely the chance to begin again, this time with clearer eyes and firmer footing. For President Ibrahim Traoré, the mission was no longer about survival. It was about building a nation that didn't just endure, but belonged to its people fully, proudly, and permanently. The challenge now wasn't just political. It was deeply cultural, emotional, even spiritual. After decades of instability, colonization, and systemic neglect, the very idea of home had become fragile for many Burkinabe. Especially for the returnees, those young men and women who had spent most of their lives abroad, who had returned not to memories, but to unfamiliar streets and distant traditions. And yet, something was changing. In town after town, village after village, those once seen as strangers were beginning to take root. It wasn't easy. Some still stumbled through local dialects. Others wrestled with the rhythms of a society that often felt slower, more rigid, or painfully under-resourced. But the difference now was simple. They had a reason to stay. A reason to contribute. A reason to try. One of the key moments came when Ibrahim initiated the Community Integration Compacts, a grassroots framework designed not by bureaucrats, but by locals and returnees working side by side. The idea was straightforward. For every repatriated citizen, the host village would offer mentorship, land use support, and social inclusion. In return, the returnee would commit to a community project building, a school latrine, running literacy classes, fixing irrigation systems, or setting up basic clinics. The compacts didn't just work. They transformed relationships. In one remote northern town, a young repatriate named Malika, web developer from Los Angeles, set up a solar-powered digital learning hub for children. In return, the village chief offered him land to build his home, and local youths helped him farm it. At first they called me the American, Malik laughed in an interview. Now they call me our guy. That hits different. These success stories multiplied. A returnee nurse from Philadelphia helped a midwife modernize her practice using basic telemedicine. A sound technician from Atlanta recorded oral histories of village elders and broadcast them as podcasts in local languages. A mechanic from New Jersey started a rural apprenticeship program with tools he bought using his own savings. With each act, the gap between diaspora and homeland narrow, replaced not by slogans, but by shared effort. But perhaps the most powerful symbol of rootedness came in the form of children. In the months following the failed coup, the first babies born to returnee couples were given names blending cultures: Awa, Joy; Ibrahim, James; Fatu, Bel. And with every new birth it became clearer. This was no longer just a return. It was a planting of families, of identities, of futures. President Ibrahim watched these developments closely, often visiting communities without notice. He'd sit under trees listening to teenage girls talk about opening tech startups or watch boys train for football tournaments organized by repatriated youth. During one such visit, he spoke softly to a young farmer, saying, "We used to dream of escape. Now we dream of staying. That's how I know we're winning." To sustain this momentum, the government introduced two pivotal long-term programs. The first was Roots and Wings, a national mentorship and exchange initiative that paired local youth with returnees for year-long collaborations. One mentor might teach website coding while the mentee taught farming techniques. Another might share marketing skills in return for storytelling lessons in Mure. The goal wasn't just skill sharing. It was mutual respect. The second was Burkina 2050, a visionary roadmap that encouraged communities to imagine and design their ideal futures, not from top-down policies, but through participatory planning. With tools provided by the government and oversight by repatriate-led civic councils, villages began sketching 25-year plans that included everything from green energy goals to conflict resolution mechanisms. Some skeptics said the plans were too idealistic. Ibrahim disagreed. "It's only idealistic if we think we don't deserve better," he said. "But when people believe in tomorrow, they behave better today." And behavior was indeed changing. Crime rates began to fall in areas with high returnee involvement. School attendance rose, especially among girls. Trade cooperatives emerged that cut out corrupt middlemen. Even local disputes, often settled violently in the past, were being resolved through new mediation centers co-run by repatriates and village elders. Hope was no longer just an abstract emotion. It was measurable. Still, challenges remained. Climate change, global inflation, and shifting regional politics all threatened the fragile progress. Ibrahim never sugarcoated it. "We are not invincible," he told citizens during an address on National Unity Day. "But we are no longer invisible, and that makes all the difference." And as he closed his speech, he looked into the eyes of farmers, teachers, children, and returnees and added, "We've returned to the soil. Now, let's grow something they can't uproot." Years from now, when people look back on this chapter of Burkina Faso's history, they may not remember every speech or every headline. But they will remember the shift, that quiet but undeniable moment when a country decided to write its own story instead of having it written for them. The streets once walked by returnees full of uncertainty are now filled with children learning both code and folklore. The bridges once built out of desperation now connect not just regions, but generations. The fields once neglected are now being harvested by young farmers using apps developed by former immigrants. But the greatest transformation wasn't physical, it was psychological. For the first time in decades, the people of Burkina Faso at home and abroad began to believe that they were not doomed to be victims of fate or pawns of larger nations. They were, in the words of President Ibrahim Traoré, the architects of their own destiny. Ibrahim himself became more than just a leader. He became a symbol not of perfection, but of possibility. A man who proved that dignity could be political, that patriotism didn't require submission, and that courage doesn't always look like war, it sometimes looks like listening, forgiving, and insisting on better. His vision outlived the crisis. The schools stayed open. The repatriation program became a permanent part of national policy. The Future Builders turned into a movement, spreading across borders, inspiring neighboring nations to explore their own paths to self-sufficiency. But Ibrahim remained grounded. In his final address of that transformative year, he stood before thousands and simply said, "Do not build for me. Do not build in my name. Build for the child who is not yet born, For the dream we will never finish, for the soil that holds our ancestors, that is how we will last." And with those words he stepped down from the staginote as a man retreating, but as a leader passing the torch. This is more than a story about one man or one country. It's about what happens when dignity meets leadership, when forgotten youth are given not just a place but a purpose. Ibrahim Traoré didn't just welcome back his people, he challenged a system, reignited a generation, and reminded all of us that power belongs to the people when they choose to rise. If this story moved you, if it made you think about your roots, your future, or your responsibility, don't keep it to yourself. Share this video with someone who needs to hear it. Drop a comment below. What was your favorite moment in the story? And tell Yusuf you were given the chance. What would you build for your country? Most importantly, subscribe to this channel and hit the notification bell so you never miss a story that challenges, uplifts, and inspires. Because here, we don't just watch the world, we understand it, one story at a time.